Alrighty, so I'm reading The Way of Kings and I am on page 1010. And the reason I'm taking a break right here is the Sandalanche is beginning, I can feel it. The pace is quickening, the blood is pumping, things are happening, and I have a plane journey tomorrow. We're flying up to visit some family and I had to get this video done so that I can guilt-free read the last 200 or so pages. Undoubtedly gonna be an incredible ending, as many people have already told me, but I can also just tell from the slow and deliberate build-up of this book so far. And I just wanted to be completely able to enjoy that without thinking, I probably should stop here and do a video. So it's been about 100 and maybe 20 pages since the last time we spoke, and a lot has already happened, and I feel like the story is hanging on a precipice and I'm about to take that dive in. But before I do, let's look over the precipice and talk about what may be on the way down. First up is Dalinar, and I am a massive Dalinar fan. The reason I'm a massive Dalinar fan is he does what he thinks is right, and he does it every single time, it would seem. So we've rejoined him. His sons are back on board with their father because he said he was gonna abscond the throne. And basically they're there, and he has a vision, and he has Feverstone Keep, and he essentially sees what we think is the end of the Knights Radiance, their betrayal. And the first thing I have to say, this is one of many scenes that I really should go back and read 2 or 3 times, because I'm sure the amount of clues that are in this scene are huge, and it can give me some indications of what's going to happen forwards. And a lot of the time I do go back and I reread some of these scenes because I know I'm going to be doing these videos, and I'm like, I need to get all the clues. But I've just been so excited with this section especially, and overall this book, that I haven't really done that. I've been so excited to push forward and just enthralled and enjoying the story that I've definitely foregone some detail to move forward. And I missed that a little bit. Having done these videos, I always feel like I need to get as much as possible from every scene so that I can make intelligent guesses going forwards. But it's been nice that a story has just magnetically pulled me forwards. And what that means is I'm sure there's some things I missed in the scene, but I did really enjoy them. And that's the same for a couple of scenes just in this section that I've spoken on. But one thing that obviously does get said is that these are the first and the last. That's what one of the Radiants and the Lethe man, it would seem, says to Dalinar, or Dalinar's character, in the dream. What that could mean, I don't know, but I think it's definitely a massive clue as to what could happen next. And we get a pretty incredible scene where we see the bloody beginning of the shard blades and the shard plate, and their interaction with the general mass of humanity. And I'm sure they have a pretty bloody past anyway, due to them being weapons and utilized by the Knights Radiance, and I'm sure that they killed a lot of people. However, we see the jealousy and the I suppose, trading of shard plate and blade between men and women, and yeah, it is probably pretty brutal. I reckon the amount of people that have been murdered by them from that moment to now must be incredible, and not just on the battlefield, but murdered maybe in sleep and in other ways to get a hold of that plate. Kind of reminded me a little bit of the Elder Wand in Harry Potter, just by the fact that you must destroy and kill the person before to be able to have it. And that's why I kind of think that Amaram's plate and blade will actually somehow choose Kaladin if the opportunity arose for that to happen. So I suppose that's one of my predictions for what's going to happen in this book. We also get something else. We get a glossed over revelation from Dalinar that he's already seen the Night Watcher. And I feel like he also mentions that's why he thinks he can't remember his wife. And then he just doesn't mention it again. So I think maybe he went and asked for a boon. And I would guess that he saw the Night Watcher after his brother's death, and maybe he was feeling a lot of guilt. So I think maybe the boon he asks for is to not feel the guilt anymore and not remember the guilt, because I know he feels a lot of guilt, because I think he's like passed out drunk when his brother is murdered and he feels like he should have been there. But maybe what happens is, as we already know, the Night Watcher, whatever he, she, it may be, maybe decides to take that in a different way, as we already know they kind of do, and these magical beings tend to, they're not very literal. Maybe he harbors some guilt about his love for his brother's wife, and that's why the boon he requests actually erases the memory of his wife, potentially. I mean, that's like a pretty wild guess, but it was the first thing that came to mind, and it was the only thing that seemed to fit the jigsaw puzzle that was that section of the story. And one thing that he notices a lot is the shining of the Knights Radiant, and we just got an incredible scene with Kaladin, and he shines, and obviously we're going to talk about that in a minute, but I think that Amaram's plate and blade will be passed to Kaladin, and I'm going to talk more about that, a lot more, but I think Dalinar is going to help facilitate that, and I think that Dalinar will prove that he is a fantastic human being, because Kaladin really needs that, because he doesn't believe that the Light Eyes could be right now. So maybe he even hands over the plate. Maybe he gives Kaladin his plate and blade. Something like that. But well, no, I don't know, because I do think that Kaladin is going to get the plate and blade from Amarim, but maybe Dalinar sacrifices himself during this journey somehow to prove, because he has to prove to Kaladin that he is who he thinks he is. So yeah, I'm a bit muddled up, but Kaladin gets his plate and armor from Amaram, but Dalinar makes some kind of sacrifice to prove to Kaladin that he is who he is. And we also would get what we think is Sadea proving that he still honors whatever pact him and Dalinar took, and that they are truly allies. And although earlier I said I don't like Sadea, now I do. So I'm whatever Brandon Sanderson is trying to point me towards, I'm just willfully going, because now I do kind of like Sadea. It does beg the question, who tried to kill the king? My first thought was, well, maybe it was Sadea, and this is like his best cover-up story. But I now don't think that's the case. I still have a sneaky suspicion that maybe it was Zeph. But then I also thought potentially it could be one of Dalinar's sons. And I don't know why. I don't have any good reasoning for that as well. So this isn't so much me predicting as just kind of pointing at every single person, so that when it comes up, I can be like, aha, I told you. But no, I'm not 100% certain. I don't think Sadea is bad, but that might come back around and bite me. But I don't think that the king is making it out of this story. Definitely not making it out of like the second book, at least. I just don't think he's a good enough character, and it will cause so much struggle and strife for him to die. So I'm going to stick with that. The big main question is, why is Dalinar getting these visions? And we saw Kaladin have a vision as well at one point. And I think the reason he's getting these visions is because he has to be the one to unite them, right? And I think he knows, based on, I'm kind of giving away all of what, well, you guys have already read the story, right? You know what happens to Kaladin in this little section, and what I'm, excited to talk about next. But I think that Dalinar has to be the guide for Kaladin. He has to be the one that believes in him and props him up and gives him the power, not gives him the power, but gives him the power in terms of the political power to make the strides that he needs to. And I think a lot of that's coming from his interactions with the Radiants, so that he can recognize one, and then also see maybe where they went wrong previously, so he can be some kind of guide to Kaladin. So on to Kaladin. He's shining in the light. Teft helps him see what is and what isn't, and who and what he may be. We find out that Syl is not a Windspren. Did she start as a Windspren? I don't know, I'm a bit confused by that, but she's not currently a Windspren. So I thought maybe she's a Radiant Spren, and they're attracted to those who could become Radiants. Maybe, that would be pretty cool. But we discover later on that she is giving something to Kaladin, allowing him to use this Stormlight, it would appear. But then also he is giving something to her, which he doesn't appear to be losing anything, but he appears, she seems to be gaining humanity, gaining memories, sense of humor, understanding of the things around them. So what does that mean about Spren? I still don't know. And I feel like I normally have not amazing guesses, but like I have guesses as to how the Spren work, and not the Spren, but like how the magical devices work in these stories that I read. And oftentimes I'm wrong, but at least I have ideas. But the Spren is a really well kept secret. I really don't understand how they fit into the story. But you know, here's another little clue that once again I can't use. But if it's basically like a direct trade-off, then you would imagine that all the Radiants were a little bit different to each other based on whatever spren they're getting that trade-off from, if that is indeed how it works. But from what we know so far, all of the Knights Radiant seem to be, you know, their powers seem to be pretty similar. And granted, we don't know loads about them, but maybe if each spren gave you something a little bit different, then I feel like we would know about it. So why are all the spren a little bit different? I don't really know. So what happens next? I like that Dalinar and Sadea are putting their wits together and their armies together to try and win this war. The big question is, does Kaladin lend himself to that? Because he does mention his hatred of the Parshendi. He definitely does some foreshadow on the idea that he's going to use the Parshendi's reverence for their own dead to defeat them. So he seems pretty dead set on defeating the Parshendi. But also, like, his real enemy is, in his head, is the Light Eyes and the armies around him. So I highly doubt he can just take his bridgemen and rise up and then, you know, maybe lead one of these armies and forgive those around him. So I'm torn as to what way this story is going to go, but I do think the Parshendi are going to be dealt a pretty deadly blow in this book. But it will not finish them off, obviously, because there's so much to learn about the Parshendi. We know that they fight in pairs. We know they can leap over the chasms. And Dalinar brings up a fantastic point. Why have they not been bringing more of their armies onto the chasms? And I think it's because they don't want to win the war. But why would they not want to win the war? I don't know. There must be a force that's, you know, trying to stop everybody uniting together. So I do think that Kaladin's going to get a blade and plate, because he's resolved that he's going to become who he could become. And I think that maybe is a mixture of, well, he's going to become a Knight Radiant, basically, a Knight Radiant. And I think it's going to rock. I think it's going to be awesome. I think we're going to see the death of Amaram. I truly hope that he arrives and is dealt with revenge. And are we going to get an all happy end to this book? No, probably not. Probably Zeph appears and starts to do murder and splits the Alethi down the middle, and Dalinar and Kaladin have to decide to unite. But the one thing I am certain on is that Dalinar and Kaladin need each other. They've been looking for each other the entire book. Their ideals just perfectly mesh, and they can both prove each other wrong and prove each other right at the same time. And I'm looking forward to that union. So what else happens? We get a lot of Hoid, and Hoid is fast becoming one of my favorite characters. And when I read the Mistborn trilogy, he was a cool character. You already knew he was a cool character, but it felt obviously like a side quest. Like he just popped up, especially just like here and there in the Mistborn trilogy, even though I don't really know where he was popping up, just based on, I feel that there's a couple of times he popped up that I missed, basically. But obviously we see him with Kelsier, and it also gives me a newfound respect for how Kelsier dealt with Hoid and dealt with the two shards, because he just seems to be a regular dude, and he like punches them in the face and tries to do battle with them, and really doesn't have the reverence for the shards that everyone else seems to have, and for Hoid as well. You know, everyone else is like amazed by them and skeptical, and Kaladin's like, no, I will beat this thing. Which I love. He's very spunky. What was I talking about? Hoid does a couple of great things. So number one, he brings up Adonalsium, which at this point I know from the previous books, or I think I know, is the name of the completed being where all 16 of the shards come from. So he brings that up, doesn't really explain why, fails to elaborate, but he's talking to Dalinar at the time. And he also later on, I need to read the name of this thing, I think his name was Derethil. He interacts with Kaladin while Kaladin's doing some soul searching, explains the story of Derethil. And this is another scene where I think if I go back and read it 2 or 3 more times, I will get so many more clues as to who Hoid is and a bit about his background, because he mentions things like the name Hoid was someone that he should have helped or could have been, or something like that. So that's something I definitely need to go back and read, because I'm really interested in his story, and I'm sure he gives so many clues there. But we get that fantastic story, we get the flute and the passing of the flute, we get the crazy revelation that I think his name is pronounced Sigil was like his apprentice. So I'm sure he has some information and knowledge, and there must be a reason why he was being taught to be a world singer, because maybe he shows Kaladin around the world. Maybe Kaladin doesn't end up being, you know, the head of this Alethi army in any way. Maybe he truly does escape with his gang and they go and visit different places and unite the world together. There's so many possibilities. But yeah, Hoid is doing Hoid things and it's a lot of fun. So we get a really interesting head note as well, and it says the burdens of 9 become mine, and that has to be the guy, the herald, who was left behind and scammed by the other 9. And that revenge story must be crazy, and I feel like there's a link between that and somehow the Knights Radiant and the Spren, and I don't know, like all of it obviously is linked together, but that guy must have so much hatred inside of him. I'd be so surprised if he doesn't come out just on the vengeance trail, or if he's not out already somehow causing problems for everybody. So yeah, don't have any guesses on that, but it was interesting to see that pop up. Something else that was really interesting was the Ardent, and I feel like the Ardents are causing a lot of mischief. Obviously we had the one that was trying to poison Yasna and was trying to use Shallan as a, like a tool in his war. And then we have another Ardent here, and he was interacting with Dalinar, and he was saying some kind of weird things, and they were playing 4D chess with their, who they were trying to negotiate at the time. And I can't remember exactly what he says, but I wrote down in my notes, it was the white-robed Ardent, and I think they were white robes. And it just feels like they're all connected, these Ardents, and there potentially is like a big cult, and they know, and they're trying to impact and change things, kind of in the way Hoid is. But I don't know, maybe they have somebody Hoid-ish, but on the other side, kind of running this Ardent situation. And I wouldn't be surprised if the person who gave Zeph their last orders was the head of these Ardents in some way or manner. I think that would be a really interesting idea, because I've completely forgotten about that guy until right now, and he was a Alethi if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, it's all very exciting. So now I get to read the last however many pages, I think like close to 300 on this plane journey, and I can just completely enjoy it. So the next video we have will be me having finished this book. I'm 95% certain, which is awesome. If you've enjoyed the journey so far, please like and subscribe. It obviously helps the channel out a lot, and I will see you in the next video.